American Civil War was a war in the United States between the Union and the Confederacy. The main reason of the war was the status of slavery, since almost 4 million of the 32 million Americans were enslaved black people, almost all in the South. The South's main source was cotton, and its main workforce was the slaves' work, so they didn't want the abolition of slavery. They were also against high tariffs because if the North had foreign countries high tariffs, these foreign countries will also put high tariffs to the USA. That's the reason why the South prefers stronger state government and less federal government. The federal government main source of income was the tariffs.
Many Southern leaders felt threatened if the Republican candidate Abraham Lincoln won the 1860 election because the Republican Party was determined to prevent any spread of slavery to the territories, and the Southern leaders didn't want this to happen. So when Lincoln won, Southern leaders felt disunion. As a result, 7 slave states declared their secession from the country. The first one was South Carolina, to form the Confederacy. Lincoln's main motivation to make the abolition of slavery a warm aim was to keep Great Britain and France from recognizing the southern states.
Winfield Scott was the general-in-chief of the Union Army at the start of the war. By 1861, he devised the Anaconda Plan, a military strategy for the Union to block the southern ports and call for an advance down the Mississippi River to cut the South in two. By December 1860, the Missouri Compromise was proposed to be reestablished by constitutionally banning slavery. The Missouri Compromise was an agreement that said Missouri was a slave state, while Maine would be a free state. At this time, both sides prepared for war. The fight broke out in April 1861 when the Confederate Army began the Battle of Fort Sumter in Charleston, South Carolina. Confederate President Jefferson Davis ordered General P.G.T. Beauregard to attack the fort before a relief expedition could arrive. He bombarded Fort Sumter on April 12, 13, forcing its surrender.
The First Battle of the Bull Run was the first major victory for the South. Jackson gained the nickname Stonewall for this great stand at this battle. Unfortunately, he died in the Battle of Chancellorsville. George McClellan was the first Union general over the Army of the Potomac, and was the one charged with capturing Richmond, which was the capital of the Confederacy in 1862. But then, the Battle of Fredericksburg was won by the Confederacy. As a result of this loss, Hooker became commander of the Union Army of the Potomac.
We cannot forget about the Western Territories. We can say that Western Territories were important to both North and South Territories because they would decide who had control in Congress. But the Battle of Shiloh pitted the two Western generals against each other. The Confederates made a surprise attack that pushed Union forces against the river as the night fell. Then the Navy landed additional reinforcements, so the Union counterattacked and won a decisive victory. The Emancipation Proclamation stated that slaves of any state in rebellion shall be thenceforward and forever free. This proclamation was issued by Abraham Lincoln.
Abraham Lincoln wrote the Gettysburg Address, a speech that starts out with 47 years ago. In total, the war left 600,000 people dead. President Lincoln was re-elected President of the United States in 1864, but he was assassinated by John Wilkes Booth in Ford's Theater just 5 days after Lee's surrender in 1865.
Fun facts: Harriet Beecher Stowe wrote the book Uncle Tom's Cabin, an anti-slavery novel that had a profound effect on attitudes toward African Americans and slavery in the U.S. In consequence, John Brown raided a federal armory in Harper's Ferry and planned to march south to free the slaves.
Dred Scott was an enslaved black man who sued for his freedom because he had been taken into free U.S. territory. He had automatically been freed and was legally no longer a slave. Gunpowder was a military technology not used in a major conflict prior to the Civil War. The CSS Holly was a submarine of the Confederate States and the first combat submarine to sink a warship, the USS Housatonic.
In both the North and the South, a draftee could hire a substitute to go to war for him. The Southern states got funds for the war by printing money. The Trent Affair was when two Confederate representatives were taken by the Union from the British ship Trent.
Stuart was the Confederacy famous cavalry commander that gathered the information to help win the 7 Days Battle. Robert E. Lee, a Confederate general, military genius, and personality, is often credited with holding the Confederate Army together.